Hey everyone, welcome back to the Long Island Retro Gaming Podcast. I'm Mike Staub and I have a great guest with you today. I have Seamus Keane, who is the director of special events at the Cradle of Aviation Museum. To those of you who have come to the Long Island Retro Gaming Expo, the Cradle of Aviation is where the event is hosted every year. We are eternally grateful to Seamus and to the venue every single year for helping us put together a better and bigger and better and greater show every single year. And without the expo, without the Cradle of Aviation, this place wouldn't have a home. And Seamus has been nothing but incredibly supportive to work with and just an all around awesome guy. So Seamus, introduce yourself. Say hello.
Hey guys, how are you? Yeah, as Mike was saying, Seamus, Director of Special Events here at the Cradle. Work in conjunction with the entire team with Long Island Retro, including Joel, obviously, to put the expo together every year here at the museum. Long Island Retro approached us a few years ago, and I think it was because I had a different thing going on at that time with probably about, I want to say maybe Joel and the guys approached me maybe 5-6 years ago now. As of 8 years ago, I had put together the Arcade Age exhibit here at the museum, and that had been kind of coming and going for a couple of years by the time they approached me. And it was just, I think we all had the same love for retro gaming. I think I was just doing something different than what Joel and yourself, Mike, and everyone else involved was doing, and it was just seemed like a really good fit.
Yeah, it's an excellent fit. I love the Cradle of Aviation Museum. Even when the retro game stuff isn't there, it's still just a really cool spot to see a whole bunch of stuff. But the Arcade Age exhibit is like such a great draw for us as fans, and it's such a great celebration of arcade history and retro gaming history and how important that is to entertainment history in general and computing history and all these things. So you said that you started with the Arcade Age exhibit 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah, it's officially this. It's like 8.5 years now going on.
Wow,
I
that's
started
amazing.
building
So
it um, about 11 years ago. The
wow,
concept
that's
came about
incredible.
11 years ago, and I started building it, collecting and getting the research together about 11 years ago.
Wow, that's incredible stuff, man. And it's awesome. For those of you who have not seen the Arcade Age exhibit, if you're local, get there when you can, when it's available. And if you're not local, check the calendars and all that stuff at the Cradle of Aviation's website so that you can see when that exhibit is live and well, because it's one of the coolest things ever. So what got you to set that ball in motion? It's such a cool and unique idea, especially for a museum as a museum piece. And I agree that I think it absolutely is an important piece of history. But like, how do you get the ball rolling there? Like, I obviously, you said you started, 11 years ago. Like, what got you started there, and how did you get to where you are now with it?
I was literally sitting at my desk, and my assistant at the time, Bill Herring, had a desk behind me, and something struck me in my head. An idea had come to in my head the previous evening, and I just literally just threw crap on the wall, right? So I just threw it out to him, and I was like, "Hey, I've got this idea. It's been somewhat kind of done before a little bit. At that time, there was a traveling exhibit going around the country. I forget the name of it. But I was like, what about an exhibit on the subculture of the 70s and 80s into early 90s arcade, based around the history of arcade games?" And he just thought it was the kind of coolest thing. And so I sketched out a proposal. I gave a proposal to the executive director and deputy director at the time here at the museum, and they loved it. They thought I was crazy. but they loved it. They had no idea how I was going to get everything together within a year's time. So got the green light, got the project green lit, and then kind of reached out to a few people I knew who had been involved with arcades in the Long Island area and in the like Queens, New York area and Bronx, New York area, and just
Okay.
people I knew for years.
Yeah.
And I reached out to all of them, and they all thought I was absolutely out of my mind. They were like, there's no way you're going to get 50, 60, 70 cabinets in working condition. And sure enough, we didn't. We got about 70 cabinets, and 60 of them were in non-working condition. And it was just a labor of love learning how to fix them and get them back into working order, and then display them. It took us about a year plus to build the exhibit. And I think the entire time
Okay.
we were building it, I thought I was crazy. At the end of it, towards the end of it, before we opened it the first year, I was like, is this gonna work? Are people gonna get what I'm saying here, the importance and relevance of the technology of arcade games in particular, and video games in particular, to what it is now? Um, and I think the diehards really got it. I think they understood what I
Yeah.
was trying to do, and I think a lot of the naysayers ended up getting it when they came to the exhibit and they saw tracing the history back to the 50s, even like during the Cold War, using
Yeah.
that technology, like the PDP computers with Space War, and using that technology to build a video game, and then just taking somebody like Nolan Bushnell to come around and kind of gravitate towards that and kind of borrow quotes the ideas and put that into an arcade cabinet. So I think yeah, it literally came out of it. Honestly, the entire idea came out of a dream I had one night. That's all I can
Yeah.
say.
Hey, I think that's sometimes all you need, right? You need a dream, you need a spark, and a force of will to get it to happen.
Mhm.
And for someone who loves museum pieces in general, including the arcade age exhibit and the history of arcade games and how that's expanded into the history of retro games and retro
Mhm.
computers and all that stuff. And when I talk to Joel about this stuff, there's always something kind of educational about how we do our expo. It's something that we want people to enjoy stuff, but we also want them to learn.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important part of the piece because it's hard, it's easy, right? It's easy as a modern gamer today to kind of lose where that all started and where that all came from and how we got to where we are from the early beginning days. You're talking about stuff from like the 50s and
Mhm.
60s where you talk about like Space War and eventually the kind of cabinetized you know you brought up Nolan Bushnell
Mhm.
kind of version of it
Yeah.
with computer space, which the arcade age exhibit absolutely has a
Yeah,
computer
we have
space.
one working. Thank God.
So that's kind of like is computer space like the gem of that collection? Is that like one of the big draws there,
It's the
or
gem of my personal collection. So yeah, I guess it ends up being the gem to the historian of the collection,
Mhm.
right? Or the diehard like myself or yourself, or somebody like Joel, or somebody like, let's say, George Portugal, whatever, even George Smith, like to people in the know and people who are obsessed with the history of it and the history of the subculture as well to tell the story. Yeah, I would say that's the gem. But that's all up to everyone's opinion. You'll get people who come in
Yeah,
here and be
yeah,
like, we'll completely ignore that cabinet totally to go to their gem, that they want to go to their game, whether it be Spy Hunter or Double Dragon or something like that. But I mean, to me, yeah, I think it's the crown jewel in the collection. Yeah.
yeah. It's special to have like the first consumer, right,
Mhm.
consumer arcade machine in an exhibit like that because people with passing knowledge won't even realize that
No,
like there was stuff before Pong.
no.
And I think that when you see stuff like computer space, it really like goes, oh wow, so this goes even back a little further.
Yep.
So obviously the collection has grown over the years. I feel like you all over there at the Cradle working on all this stuff nonstop. You're like a bunch of wizards who can fix, I think, anything at this point.
Well, almost anything, almost anything. I still, we still, most of us still get electrocuted. From time to time, we get shocks and we get bit. We got bit, we get bit off of a chassis of a monitor, but
Yeah.
a lot of it is trial and error. Because the arcade repairman, that's not a job anymore. Like the
No.
TV repairman, that's not a job anymore. Most of the guys who went out to sites. So let's
Hmm.
just say Long Island at its height, we had, I don't know how many we had, but let's roughly say we had 100 full time arcades on Long Island. It was probably more than that. But you had maybe a dozen or more than that TV repairmen who transformed from being TV repairmen at that time to being monitor repairmen
Yeah.
arcades, because
Yeah.
the CRTs work very similarly to what they were used to.
Yeah.
Um, that job's gone. That job doesn't exist anymore. You blow your TV out now, you go buy a new one. You go to Costco and buy a brand new one for $300.
Yeah.
Um, so a lot of the tech being so old, it's definitely a lot more difficult to go through the schematics and then repair things. And a lot of it's trial and error. You know, we might repair something, quote unquote, 4 times, 5 times before we get it right,
Yeah. Yeah.
before it comes actually sparks and pops back up and the screen comes back up and the game's playing. We might have to do something 4 or 5 times.
Well, it's like anything else, right? It's like anything else that's mechanical, electrical. You troubleshoot, you think
Mhm.
you find the problem, you fix the problem, hopefully, and then if you don't, then it's something else. So it's really amazing to see because it's with video games and with arcade games and things like that. It's like okay, it's the game, right? It's the software, but what's also just as interesting is how it works and the hardware and how they get these things to work. Whether like they're a more mechanical game and they're more you know they're more video based or whatever they're doing with the processor. So it's amazing. And over the years, even like in the few years, my time with Long Island Retro Gaming, it's amazing to see how the exhibit has grown over the years and just how much more it encapsulates in terms of like arcade culture and arcade history. But before we talk a little bit more about that, do you have any stories or any um, kind of repair jobs that might have been a little bit more unique or different, or it's just kind of every machine's its own thing?
Every machine's own thing. What I'm into now is, different than what I was into when I started. So I used
Okay.
to just want to populate cabinets. If I had an empty cabinet that had a working monitor, I wanted to, run a JAMA harness into it and get a game into it and get it playable as a game.
Okay.
Now I'm more into what we kind of affectionately refer to as arcade archaeology. So if I get a cabinet and I tear it apart, I want to know what did it start life as? Whatever it started life as is what I want to put it back to. So, like during the height of the pandemic, I thankfully held on to my job at least part time here at the museum, and I was here as kind of like a day watchman for the building, right? And the exhibit was out at that time, but where this golf game come into us, like a PGA golf game with this huge trackball in the middle of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
like, this is not a golf game. Someone did something to this cabinet to make it a golf game. I want to know what this is. Big, giant
Yeah.
control panel on it. So I started taking things out, and I was like, I still don't know what this is. I see all the buttonholes drilled in. So I peel back the green control panel overlay that the people would put on it to make it a PGA golf thing. And I see this brown bits, and I see this white circle, court, whatever, and I'm like, don't even tell me that this was an NBA Jam.
Oh,
Peel
that's
the rest of it
incredible.
off, and
That's
somebody
awesome.
had, wrecked an NBA Jam to put a golf into it. So I just
Wow.
decided that during the pandemic, on my downtime, which I'm sure everyone had a lot of, um, I decided to actually rebuild that and put that back to what it came out of the factory as, which is an NBA Jam. It took me Took us a really long time. That was a really hard repair job because we kept blowing the monitor. The monitors that were used on those originally was what's called a tri-sync monitor,
Okay.
and they were from a company called Cortec back in the day. A company called Sharper Image Cortec monitor, Korean-made monitor, solid, gorgeous, beautiful monitor. But when you blew a certain piece of this monitor out, you couldn't get a cap kit for that particular monitor. So I went through three monitors on that, and finally decided to settle on an old Hantorax instead. But yeah, that took me literally 3 years to get working.
Wow.
Almost a full
It's
three
like,
years. It would work for like a few days, and I'd blow the monitor out right away. Um, and but yeah, I mean that was definitely a really special repair job for me because then when I got it done, I was like, well, you know, while I'm working on it, it's my favorite game, and when it gets done, it's my favorite game because I get to play it, you know. But
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I think that was probably a very long repair job, I guess.
Yeah, no, but
Mhm.
that's cool
Yeah.
though. The whole premise of arcade archaeology is
Hmm.
just fascinating to me
Yep.
to hear that because that's what they would do,
Hmm.
right? Obviously, many of us know the story of Radar Scope with Donkey
Hmm.
Kong and things like
Yep.
that. So it's incredible that you could go out and like find out what game this cabinet used to
Yep.
be, and we know that in the 90s and the 80s and stuff, they were just kind of sometimes just repurpose cabinets and put new boards in and things like that. So that's really crazy
Because it was
stuff. And
cheaper for companies at the time,
yeah,
like Atari or Century or whatever, to ship what's called a kit. They would
yeah,
ship you a kit. They would ship you an Atari kit for
yeah,
whatever random game. Um, Actually, Crystal Castles, very famous trackball game, right? Gorgeous game, beautiful game. That was shipped for the majority as a kit that you would
hmm,
just put into your centipede or your millipede cabinet. You would just put that
yeah,
right in. You would replace all the graphics, new overlay, whatever, and you would swap the board out, and it would work in that
mm,
cabinet.
wow. That's like you said, it's good to save money, and it's probably good for the person who owns the cabinet too,
Mhm.
because they don't have to buy a new
Right,
cabinet.
exactly.
I totally get that. So I want to get back to like how the collection has grown over the years. I mean, the stuff you guys have is fantastic. It's amazing to see. Whether I'm at an 80s night or at the expo itself, it's one of those things where it's just like, oh my gosh, like you keep getting more unique and stranger things, and obviously I love that stuff. So, what's the mindset with the growth of the arcade age exhibit and the arcade stuff from the expo? What is the mindset on how you seek to grow or what you're looking to collect moving forward?
Um, it's always kind of like a debate
Hmm.
in my head and in our heads totally. Like we try to gravitate towards what we consider rare and unusual, but also we try to gravitate that we try to do that in conjunction with what's desirable to us, but also what's desirable to the player, right? What are
Yeah.
people actually going to pick up and play and want to play? Because I've had plenty of quote unquote rare or obscure games in the collection at one point or other. Nobody touches them or go near them. Nobody wants to play them because
Yeah.
it could be that they're a completely crappy game. It could be like they're just a god awful game, but I kind of stopped doing that because I want people to gravitate towards the cabinet. I want people to play something and enjoy it and find a new game that they want to fall in love with. So really, it's kind of hard to do that. But if something unique comes up that I know, let's say it sold a lot of cabinets for Atari or Stern, whatever, then yeah, and I know we don't have it in the collection, then yeah, I will definitely gravitate towards, picking that up in whatever state it's in order
Hmm.
to, yeah, rebuild it or figure it out. I mean, a couple of games that we had to build out of nothing were just very, very desirable games, and it's cheaper and easier for me to build it from ground up scrap parts than it is
Yeah.
for me to go out and buy it done. Like Cubert's a good example of that. Sinistar is a good example of that. Those are two very, very desirable games that fetch in, fully restored, that they fetch a lot of money. They fetch three and a half, $4,000 each, fully done. So we can't spend money like that as the museum or as myself or as a group.
Hmm.
Long Island Retro can't spend money like that in order to acquire a cabinet. So then, if we identify something, then yeah, we just kind of go build it.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I like that. And you got to be kind of have to be flexible with
Mhm.
that type of stuff. You don't want, yeah, obviously, you don't want to spend $5,000 on an arcade cabinet. That's a lot of cash. And obviously, we've seen over the last few years, we've seen the kind of jump in the secondhand market in terms of prices of these
Yeah.
things. And however, that being said, I still think the Arcade Age exhibit has just so many unique and interesting experiences that are also good.
Mhm.
And I think your mentality there really shows when you take a look at the collection. Now, when we look forward, when we look at 2023 and we look at, where the Arcade Age exhibit is now, and looking forward towards the Long Island Retro Gaming Expo in August of 2023, what are you looking for right now? What are some pieces that you're excited to maybe get your hands on? Is there anything that like is out there in the wild that oh man, I'd love nothing more than to have this?
I have been for the last 4 years working on building. It's a very, very long term project because I'm working on building my food fight.
Oh
And
wow.
food fight's one of
Okay.
those ones where when you say it
Yeah.
to the right person, you're going to get a reaction like you just said, like, oh, yeah, oh, wow.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's
yeah,
cool.
I really want a food fight, so I'm still building that. Long Island Retro Gaming, the Lurd guys obtained a tapper.
Yes.
That's in pieces. I'm gonna try to figure that the heck out by August and get that out. And then myself and George Portugal are going to be working on a Williams Bubbles cabinet.
Ooh,
I
very
love
cool.
that game. It's a great game.
Yeah.
It's a
Great game.
pretty easy game for me to figure out and get to in terms of building it. We actually have a dedicated empty cabinet for it. So really, the only missing piece for that game would be we have to find like an original control panel.
Oh,
It's
okay.
hinged on that cabinet, so it's different than other Williams cabinets. And I think I want to build a Superman.
Ooh.
Yeah, yeah, I still want to build Superman. So there's like four like projects at the forefront of my head right now that we're going
All
to be
right.
working on and trying to get
Uh,
at least one or two of them done in time for Retro Gaming Expo. Yeah,
That's so cool.
yeah,
Yeah. The Superman one really stands
yeah,
out because I remember that game so well. And it's a game I don't play that frequently.
yeah.
So it'd be really cool to see that. I love that you have a Spider Man. That one. That
Yeah,
one's
the
great.
Spider Man's
I
good. Yeah,
love the Spider
yeah,
Man game. I love the Sega Spider Man arcade game. And I don't get to play. That's not in a lot of collections that
yeah.
I've seen or not in a lot of arcades that I've been to. So we know what you're looking to maybe find out there is kind of like a grail, right? To get
Mhm.
out there and get those things and put that stuff together. Do you have any new stuff for 2023 that you're excited to maybe unveil or show off for this year that's like new?
Like I said, we just finished the NBA Jam, which was great.
Hmm.
So I definitely want to show that off more at the expo. I'd like to. Uh, the expo guys picked up a Contra, so
Yeah.
that's great too. So I want to show off that a little bit more. Uh, they also had picked up a while back, which we had in the exhibit. We had it out, and it was, I think it was at last year's. I'm not sure though, but they got a George Portugal picked up a red tent.
Hmm.
He picked up a Nintendo red tent, which if you don't know what a red tent is, you definitely have to come over to the expo and check it out because it's this very unusual dual screen, one on either side of each other, opposite from each other, cocktail table, sit down, Nintendo versus cabinet, in a
Yeah.
sense,
Yeah.
that were designed and put in Pizza Hut restaurants across the nation. So, you know, it's definitely like niche. Like you
Yeah.
got to really know that. But once you know that and you sit down at these and play them, yeah, the red tent's a special. That's a special game. Yeah,
It's a special game. It's a really cool looking machine,
yeah,
and it just makes you kind of wish
mhm,
that you could re-experience that
yeah,
time period just a little bit, just for a little bit. But when you come to the expo, when you go to the arcade age exhibit, guests of either can really kind of go through time a little
yeah.
bit and feel what it's like. That skyway you guys have.
Mhm,
It's a great spot to play arcade
yeah.
games, and that whole level up there is amazing.
And
So for those of you
also,
out there, yeah,
sorry, one more. I'd also
oh,
just come back across. We had a game on loan to us years ago called this rare game. It's an Italian game called Dribbling.
hey,
It's like a tabletop cocktail video foosball.
yeah,
Um,
wow,
and we'd had it years ago. We gave it back after being on loan. The guy contacted me like last summer who had it. He's like, "Hey, I'm getting rid of it. I got rid of all my stuff. This is the last thing I have.
ooh,
You want it? It's yours for X amount of dollars, whatever." And I was like, "Oh yeah?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "You know what it's worth?" I said, "Yeah, I know what it's worth to the right person, whatever." Um, so I went out to the guy and I picked it up. The glass was all smashed on. It was pretty rough shape, but I knew I wanted it because I
hmm,
knew that people gravitated towards this machine. So
yeah.
that's definitely a game I'll have out for Retro Gaming Expo as well. Definitely.
Awesome. Dribbling,
Dribbling,
folks.
yep.
Folks, you got to come and check this stuff out. It's incredible. Seamus, can you give us a little bit of information on the Arcade Age exhibit? I feel like it kind of like cycles in and cycles
Yeah.
out. So, what can we let people know out there if they want to come to the expo? Obviously, we have the expo dates,
Right.
but tell us about the Arcade Age exhibit. How long is it running until, and when can they expect it? So that if they're in town or if they're local, they can come and play games.
Well, the only way you can expect it the rest of the year now is that it just cycled out. As of like
Okay.
CradleCon, our big comic book expo that we have here, our kind of like
Yeah.
Comic Con thing we have here, was the last day of it. So it's cycling out
Okay.
now, but
Okay.
to catch it this year, come to Retro Gaming Expo.
There we go. Long Island
You
Retro
have
Gaming
to come to Retro
Expo.
Gaming Expo either Friday night, Saturday, or Sunday to experience because that's when it's going to go back out on the skywalk and fill up the place with about. I think we're going to have like 60 or 70 cabinets out there from the exhibit.
Ooh,
Yeah.
very
And then
nice.
whatever
Very, very
Joel also
nice.
has up his sleeve as well as far as arcade games.
Joel's always got
Yeah,
something
he
up his
does. He
sleeve.
does.
Always some new and incredible ideas. So you heard it here, folks. If you want to experience the Arcade Age exhibit right now, you have to come to the Long Island Retro Gaming Expo. That is from August 11th to the 13th here in 2023. Seamus, I just want to thank you, man, for
Oh,
everything.
thank you, man.
Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for being incredibly supportive, and also just really great to work with. We all really appreciate the work that you and the Cradle do for us here
Thank
at
you,
Long Island
dude.
Retro
No, I
Gaming,
love working
and
with you guys.
it's the best. It's the
It
most
is.
fun. And I always love hanging out at the Cradle. Seamus, if you got anything you want to throw out there to wrap this up, any information that you might want the folks out there on the internet to hear, where they can find you or find the any information, that would be awesome.
You can find us. The Arcade Exhibit has a little Instagram, so you can find us on Instagram. Also, you can check wherever you get podcasts for the Arcade Age Exhibit podcast. We have a little podcast that we kind of do here and there. We got some episodes out there. We kind of focus on one particular game and we just talk about it for like half an hour, 45 minutes. I think we have about a dozen or more episodes up there right now. You can definitely check that out. But most importantly, go to liretro.com and buy your tickets for August. Buy them
That's
now.
right. Buy them now. Buy them now. We want you to be
Yep.
there. We want you to come. Seamus, thanks again, my
Thanks,
friend.
Mike.
And we will talk before that, but we will see you all out there on the internet in August 11th to the 13th at the Long Island Retro Gaming Expo. If you want to follow us on social media, you can find us at Long Island Retro Gaming or LI Retro. And go to the website, buy your tickets, and you get to hang out with us and play a bunch of games. So Thanks again, everyone out there. We greatly appreciate it. And Seamus, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thanks again, folks.